Good afternoon. My name is Minister Vincent Morgan. I am an associate minister at the Scope Ministry Christian Fellowship Church here in Little Rock, Arkansas, where Reverend Elvin Jackson is my pastor, along with Minister Johnny Walker and Minister Reginald Beasley are my brothers in the gospel. Today's lesson is on August 30th, this coming Sunday. It's titled Wise Up. Coming from the book of James, the third chapter, starting at verses 13 through 18, and James, the fifth chapter, verses 7 through 12. We reviewed over the past month about the author of this particular book, and I'll just recap briefly, is the James, the half-brother of Jesus Christ, who wrote this book some 25 years before the the ascension of Jesus back to heaven. We noted that James, during Jesus' ministry, earthly ministry, prior to the resurrection, was not a believer in his brother, was not a believer in Jesus, and it was after the resurrection. Rumor was that James had said that he would neither eat nor drink until he had seen Jesus, his brother, the resurrected Christ. And we know, according to 1 Corinthians, that 15th chapter, that Paul said that during those 40 days and 40 nights that Jesus walked this earth after his resurrection, that one of his appearances was to his brother James, his half-brother James. And we are not privy to the conversation that took place, but whatever the conversation was, that we know that James became this powerful voice, this powerful figure, this powerful warrior for the cause of Christ. And we know that he was a leader in Jerusalem, possibly the pastor of the church there. So the title of today's lesson in that third chapter of James is titled Wise Up. On last Sunday, we covered verses 1 through 12 in that same chapter, talking about how the dangers and destruction of that little small member of the body is called the tongue in our mouths, and that tongue that could cause so much destruction, and how small that little thing is, how much damage can be caused. They talked about how we could take a little small oar and guide a big ship. It talked about how we could tame an animal, and all these other things could be tamed, but one thing man couldn't tame was man's tongue. So let's get started in this lesson today and wise up and see what James has to say about this about the tongue, or unruly tongue. It starts off saying, "Who is a wise man and endued with knowledge among you? Let him show out of a good conversation his works with meekness of wisdom." Just a little more context. We know that at this particular time that it was not popular to be a Christian. We know that the Jews, according to that first chapter, they had been scattered abroad, and they were all over Palestine, and even possibly outside of Palestine. But we know that they were being persecuted, and they were going through things so bad that they just thought about giving up the Christian cause. We know that they had been schooled in the law of Moses, and James had pointed out that by this grace through faith are you saved. And once the Jews had realized that they could be saved and not go through all this persecution, and just by sitting back, they had become complacent. And James was telling them, and we talked about in that second chapter, about working and about allowing our works to, if we were truly saved, then our works should be evidence of the salvation. Not that works is salvation, but works are evidence of salvation. And so now he's talking in this 13th verse. He says, "Who is wise? And endued with knowledge among you." He's talking to those. It's really a setup question. It really it's really one of those kind of I gotcha type questions. There's always somebody that feels that they're better than others, that this is about other folks, not me, because I'm this or I'm that. And he said, "Let him show out in a good conversation his works with meekness and wisdom." His attitude, his conduct. Let him demonstrate that with works, with meekness and with humility and with wisdom. Not earthly wisdom, but with godly wisdom. So when you're going through stuff, when you're struggling going through things, which we all will go through at some point in life, we will all go through something. But James is saying is the character that you exemplify while you're going through something really makes a difference. We should, this is a time that we should shine. This is a time we should excel when we going through things. We shouldn't go through things the same way that an unsaved person does. Not that we're better than the unsaved person. We don't believe that there's any just good people on the earth. I believe Ecclesiastes says that there's not a just man upon the earth that doeth good and sinneth not. So this is not what we're talking about. We're talking about how we as Christians, how we are supposed to behave in the face of adversity. "But if ye have bitter envying and strife in your hearts, glory not and lie not against the truth." He's talking about if you have bitterness and envy in your heart, if you have malice, if you have you're envying something someone else has, you want it so bad that you secretly want it so bad that you just that you're obsessing over it and that you're begrudging over it. He says James says here in that 14th verse that if you have bitter envying and strife in your hearts, glory not and lie not against the truth. And talking about those folks in verse 13 that talked about that they who was wise man and endured with all knowledge. He says, don't lie to yourself. Don't lie against the truth. One thing about it, church, we brothers and sisters, we can lie to other folks, but the one who it truly matters to knows the truth. He knows it. Verse 15, "This wisdom descended not from above." This wisdom descended not from above, but is earthly, sensual, and devilish. Those that have that think that they know it all, think that they have this knowledge, think that they have this wisdom, think that they endured it all. Those that lie to this against the truth, those that have their hearts are filled with envy and strife, and this glorying like they're really something and parading around like they're better than someone else. James said that type of wisdom doesn't come from heaven. It's earthly. It's earthly wisdom. It's man-made. It's man-made wisdom. It's vain. It's vanity. It doesn't mean anything. He said it's sensual and it's what? It's devilish. We don't even have to go into that about being sensual and devilish. It is not of God, is what he's saying. It's a struggle every day to try to do those things that are right. Even when you do things that are right. Paul said that when I desire to do things that are right, he finds within his mind, he finds that what? That evil is always present. I mean, for some reason, it's always present. Even if I want to do the right thing, even if I'm doing the right thing, I found that in this old condemned body, that evil is always present. Why is evil always present? It's because one thing, church, even though we're saved, we have an infection. We have a twofold nature. We have the nature of God and we have the nature of sin. And as long as we're in these bodies, we will always, if we're Christians, we will always have that nature. You will always have the nature of God and the nature of sin. Twofold nature. The only way you have one nature is that you don't have the nature of God. You just have the old sin nature. And that's for those that are not saved. But when you become saved, that sin nature does not leave us. We have to try to keep it in check. And it's a struggle every day to do that. And James says that those things he just recounted, that is sensual and devilish, and is of the devil, and is of the sin nature. But verse 16 says, for where envying and strife is, that's important. For where envying and strife is, there is confusion and every evil work. Wherever there's envy in that, I don't care how you think you got it under control, and somebody get a new car and you're so envious of what they have, or whatever they may be in life, their social economical status, their education, their home, their jobs, their health, whatever it may be. Wherever there's envy in that and strife, James said there is confusion and every evil work. So let me just go a little bit closer. In your marriage, if you're envious of one another, there is confusion and every evil work. No wonder our marriages are not working today. Verse 17. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, and easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. That's what it says. Now look, let's read that again. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, and easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. It's loving, it's considerate, it's humble, it's submissive. That type of wisdom comes from above. It comes from God. That's what James saying. There's a difference in the wisdom that comes from the earth versus the wisdom that comes from God. The wisdom that comes from the earth says that you didn't do nothing wrong. It's okay. You can envy one another. We can lie to ourselves about the truth. We can glory around like we better than somebody else. That type of wisdom, he says, there's evil. There's every evil work present. But the wisdom that comes from God is different. It's pure. It's peaceable. It's gentle. It's easy to be entreated. It's submissive. It's compassionate. That's a difference. When we see people that behave that way, they're either one or two ways. And we don't even have to point fingers in our political realm today. We can see things that the way people act, that we know which way they are. You should tell a fruit. You could tell a tree what type of tree it is by the fruit that it bears. I've never mistaken an apple tree for a pear tree, because the apple tree doesn't bear pears, and the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace of them that make peace. It's sown in peace of them that makes peace. We talking about peace. We're talking about going through stuff. We're talking about enduring things. One of the greatest sermons that was preached, or the greatest sermon that was preached by Jesus, the Sermon on the Mount, and he talked about going through things. He talked about he said that blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. This is what James is in the context of what James talked about. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you and say all manner of evil against you falsely for my name's sake. That's the caveat. That's the catch to it. You are only blessed when men revile you and persecute you and say manner of evil against you, all manner of evil against you, when it's false, and when you have been doing things for God's sake. But in our term today in life, some of the things they say about us is true. It's not false. And James is saying that we need the wisdom from God so that we can live the lives so that we won't have a devilish life. All right, I think we start now into chapter 5, starting at verse 7. Be patient, therefore, brethren. Again, he's talking to other Christian brethren. Unto the coming of the Lord. Behold, the husbandman waiteth for the precious fruit of the earth, and have long patience for it, until he receive the early and latter rain. He's talking about the farmer that plants seeds. He talked about how he plants it in one season. He waits for the rain and wait for it to yield his crops in another season. He waits for it. You can't hurry it up. He says, but be patient. Therefore, while you're going through these things, you have to understand that God is working it out. Jesus told them in the 24th chapter of Matthew, I believe it's verse 13. He says that, but he that shall endure until the end, the same shall be saved. He was talking about the context of it was during the tribulation period. You know, the tribulation run's going to run 7 years. The first 3.5 years of it is going to be a peaceful reign. But then the second 3.5 years is going to be when all fury breaks out, when all the persecution, when all hell breaks out against the Christian, and led by the man of sin, the lawless man, the Antichrist, and that does all these signs to trick folk and to make them go through things, and it's gonna be rough on the Christian, and they're gonna be persecuting them. There'll be lives lost, and what Jesus was saying is that because some people gonna give up on Christianity and want to revert back to worshiping the beast, so that they don't have to go through this persecution. And what he's saying is, but he that shall endure until the end, the same shall be saved. Now let's clarify that. And this is what James is saying too. He's not talking about save as far as your salvation. That's not what he's talking about. And that word save in that 24th chapter is the Greek word sozo. That word means to be delivered. He says that if you're able to hold on, those that shall endure shall hold on, shall wait like the husbandman here that James is talking about, the same person shall be delivered. When? When Jesus comes. See, our salvation is not on the table here. It's not what James is talking about, losing our salvation at all. He's talking about losing that Christian character, not having the wisdom of God, and allowing ourselves to become complacent, or even just to totally backslide and go back into the life that we thought was easier. You know, when the devil wasn't trying to get you in life, it was because he had you. I've heard Christians say that it was better, it was easier for me when I wasn't even going to church, when I was doing this. You are absolutely correct. Before you became a Christian, because the devil didn't have to work for you. You were one of his angels already. You were on the payroll. Now you quit without a 30-day notice, and he's upset. So what he'll do is he'll make the rest of your life on this earth, he'll try to make it a living hell. Why? Because he can't take you to hell no more. Because God has added you to another column, and he can't do that. He can't take you to hell. So what James is trying to encourage us with, we ought to remember that in the back of our minds, no matter what we're going through in life, no matter what folks bring up on us, that no matter how bad this thing gets, that my salvation is not on the table. But my Christian character is. Now, I would caution you to make sure that you have the salvation first. But the husbandman, he has peace as he waits for it, because he knows it's going to yield his crop. He don't know what type, he don't know exactly how much, and don't know exactly when, but he knows that when it does, he knows that it will eventually. And that's how we have to keep in mind. We have to be that patient as we're going through the bad times. We got so many people right now that are laid off work due to this COVID virus, and jobs have shut down, restaurants have shut down, and all these different other standards. People are losing money, and I know it's hard right now. I can only imagine. I'm not in that boat at this moment. But don't lose our Christian character as we go through this. This is the time that we should shine. This is when the salt of the earth shall be salty. This is when the light should shine. Why? Because we know that our Father on high is in control. Verse 8, be ye also patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draweth nigh. And he says, be patient. Be patient, church. Be patient. God was patient with you. When you were running in the world, when you were doing whatever you were doing, God was patient with you. As a matter of fact, even though you're a Christian now, God's still patient with you because you're still not doing all that you should and should be doing. Should or would be doing. So God is being patient with you. James says, establish your heart. Jesus was on this earth for 33 and a half years. The last 40 days of his life, somewhere in their last 40 days, did James get converted because Jesus went to him. Now, he was patient 33 and a half years for his brother. But look at it now. God was patient with James. He's patient with us. Why can't we be patient with God? Because he's coming. Make no mistake, church. Make no mistake, my brothers and sisters, that the devil can't do anything to you that the Lord first don't allow him to do. Be careful on the positions that we put ourselves in and blame it on God, okay? Grudge not one another. Let me back up. Establish your hearts. First of all, get your heart right. Make your heart believe it. If you can get your heart convinced, the body will follow. The heart has to be, it's the soul of you. It's who you are. It's what your treasure is at. Establish your heart. Why? Because the coming of the Lord draweth nigh. Every single day that we live, church, Jesus gets closer and closer for coming back. And you get closer and closer to leaving here. Grudge not one another against one another, brethren, lest ye be condemned. Behold, the judge standeth before the door. Don't get into a grumbling match, a fight with one another about who's better, who's not better, or who has more, who doesn't have more. You can't relate to me because you're not this. You can't relate to me because you're not that. Don't get to grumbling with one another. That's the confusion. That's the enviness. That's the strife that we talked about earlier in this chapter. And that's wherever envy and strife is at. Remember, James said that there is confusion. And where there is confusion, God is not in the midst. All kind of things can happen when God is not involved, church, and God is not in the midst. Don't grumble against one another, lest we be condemned. Let's build one another up. Let's help one another get through this thing. We're all stuck in this thing called life. You may be strong today and I may be weak. Help me get through mine. And when you're weak and I'm strong, I help you get through yours. He said, wait a minute, I'm just waiting on God. Don't be foolish. God, that is called the arm of God. God uses other folk to reach down and to help his people. That is a direct, in my opinion, not indirect, that is a direct action of God. Verse 10 says, take, my brethren, the prophets, who have spoken in the name of the Lord, for an example of suffering and affliction and patience. Man, they went through something. He said, you talking about what y'all going through now, this persecution, but the prophets went through a whole lot of stuff. The prophets, some of the prophets couldn't even marry. Some of the prophets couldn't even go to funerals. Jeremiah was God told Jeremiah he couldn't even go to a funeral, even of his loved ones. So they went through a lot of persecution. They went through a lot of things. Rumor has it that one of the prophets was put in the hog and was sawed in hollow log and sawed in half. John the Baptist was the last of the prophets. He was a New Testament prophet. He was beheaded. There was a lot that they gone through, that they went through. So they suffered. And I think Peter and John rejoiced when they were whipped for God's sake. Behold, we count them happy which endure. Those that can hold on, we count those happy. Ye have heard of the patience of Job and have seen the end of the Lord. The Lord is very pitiful and of tender mercy. Job, we don't have to tell you what Job went through. We know he lost his children. We lost his home. He lost his cattle. He lost everything. But that wife that told him to curse God. But God restored unto Job and brought it back to him. He had broken out in boils. He had gone through, he was in pain. His friends had sat by with him and watched him. They suffered. But look how God vindicated him. Because why? Because God is tender and he's merciful. But above all things, my brethren, swear not, neither by heaven, neither by earth, neither by any other oath, but let your yea be yea and your nay, nay, lest ye fall into condemnation. See, he said, don't get to talking about swearing, but I swear that I'm going to do this, making those types of oaths by God's name. Because first of all, they believed that God's name was too holy to be used in everyday language, and especially to be some empty, vain repetition. He says, why? But why do we have to swear in the first place? It's because our words don't mean anything. And notice, he's talking to Christians. He's not talking to the unsaved. Our word don't mean anything. We can say one thing with a straight face and say another thing to somebody else. So we have to swear by this, swear by that, make this oath. And James said, wouldn't it be good if we just lived a life that our word meant something, that folks can trust what we say, that what we meant? If your reputation is of such, you can say yay. Yeah, I said this, or yay is yay, and nay is nay. You don't have to add any more promise onto it, or swearing onto it, or all this stuff, because folks know what you mean because of your word is good. We have a lot of folks with great credit, excellent credit, 800 credit scores. But their word is something else. They can lie up one side and down the other. We so meticulous about watching our score and making sure that everything is right. But why don't we watch our other score too? Why can't we watch both of them at the same time? Why come our words and our conversation and our conduct can't be that everything that we do should glorify God? From the way we talk, from the way we live, the way we walk, the way our conduct. But that's not always true. Especially when we're going through something. We try to justify this. Oh, normally I wouldn't do this, or I normally wouldn't say this, or you're going to make me put my religion down. No. That's the time when we really should be shining. And I'll say this as we close out. I believe we as Christians, we have caused more harm to the gospel than any unsaved person. Because we say one thing and we do another. We talked about hypocrisy in the lesson today. I believe a hypocrite is a person that says one thing yet condemn other folks for doing it. If you do something and you're doing the exact same thing, that makes you a hypocrite. Now, we shouldn't change the blueprint. We're guilty. I say things, and I'll be honest with you, or do things that are wrong, but I'll never try to justify what I do, my wrong actions according to the word of God. If it's wrong, it's wrong. I don't believe in changing the blueprint at all. James said that type of wisdom comes from above because it's gentle, it's humble, it's submissive, it's peaceable, and it treats. We try to live these lives as the scripture outlines because Jesus is nigh and he's coming back. And one of these days, he's going to deliver us from all of our tribulations. Once again, I'm Minister Vincent Morgan. I want to thank you for allowing me to share with you a few things from our Sunday school lesson today. I want to encourage you to stay in the Word of God. Don't just be a clone of what we say here at Scope, but to study the Word of God for yourselves, and so that you can know what the Word says. We want to invite you to come be a part of us on Sunday mornings at 10:45 a.m. at 9400 Halero Springs Road here in Little Rock, Arkansas, where Reverend Elvin Jackson is our pastor. Thank you, and may God bless you.